think about a massive, ancient walled city. Uh, Picture the thick stone battlements, the heavy iron gates, the whole inner keep where, the markets are bustling.
Right, it feels incredibly safe inside those walls.
Exactly. You are completely protected by the structure. But if you think about it, the absolute most dangerous job in that society isn't being the ruler just sitting comfortably on the throne.
No, definitely not. It isn't even being like the armored guard walking those high walls with a crossbow.
Yeah, the most dangerous and honestly most essential job belongs to the scouts, the individuals who intentionally leave the gates and set up camp in the dark woods outside the walls.
They act as the ultimate, totally exposed buffer between the city and whatever happens to be creeping out of the dark.
Right. And today, we're taking a custom deep dive just for you, the listener, into the sources you sent us that explore the ancient equivalent of those frontier scouts.
It's a fascinating topic.
It really is. We are unpacking an excerpt from a text called The 12 Tribes of Israel, specifically zooming in on Chapter 8, which focuses entirely on the tribe of Gad.
And our mission here is to decode the archetype of the spiritual warrior.
Right. Yes, exactly. We're going to look at how ancient historical accounts, esoteric philosophy, and mystical traditions outlined in your sources can teach us the mechanics of guarding our own inner and outer boundaries.
To really grasp this archetype, though, we have to start with the literal historical foundation of who Gad was before the text moves into all the heavy symbolism.
Good point. So historically, who are we talking about?
Well, Gad was the seventh son of Jacob, born to Leah's maid Zilpah. And right out of the gate, the very name establishes the path this tribe is going to walk.
How so?
According to the text, the Hebrew name Gad translates to, or at least plays on the words for, troop or fortune.
Oh, wow. Which instantly gives us this really heavy martial connotation. You hear troop and you immediately think of a disciplined military unit.
Exactly. And the sources show that destiny is reinforced by the blessing Jacob gives him in the book of Genesis. It's highly specific.
What did he say?
Jacob declares that a troop shall overcome Gad, but he shall overcome at the last.
Oof. So the text sets up a narrative of intense, unavoidable conflict.
Right, but it also promises ultimate, hard-fought triumph. And later on, Moses actually echoes this exact sentiment, comparing Gad to a lion that tears the arm and the crown of the head.
That is fierce, unyielding imagery. Just brutal.
It is.
But that imagery makes perfect sense when you look at where they actually lived. The physical geography in the text becomes this brilliant, really tangible metaphor for their entire identity.
Oh, definitely. The location is everything here.
Yeah. So when the Israelites were finally moving to conquer the Promised Land, the tribe of Gad made a really unusual, highly strategic choice. They settled on the eastern side of the Jordan River.
Right. They essentially requested to stay outside of Canaan proper.
Yeah. Alongside the tribe of Reuben and half of Manasseh, they accepted a land assignment that placed them in this incredibly vulnerable buffer zone. They were deliberately outside the primary borders.
But the text notes they did this in exchange for a vow.
Right.
They promised to cross the river and act as the tip of the spear, basically aiding their brothers in the conquest of the Promised Land before they would return to settle their own territory.
Okay, let's unpack this. Think of the tribe of Gad as like an ancient special forces unit.
That's a great way to look at it.
Right. They deliberately took the hardest, most exposed position on the perimeter. It's like they looked at the map, saw where the invasions would inevitably come from, and said, yeah, put us there.
Put us right in the line of fire.
Exactly. They secured the outer perimeter to protect the entire community safely tucked inside. And the description from 1 Chronicles 12.8 completely backs this up.
Oh, I love that passage.
It's wild. The text describes the Gadites as mighty men of valor, trained for battle, who could handle shield and spear, whose faces were like the faces of lions, and who were as swift as gazelles upon the mountains.
That is the pinnacle of martial excellence. But, the source material doesn't stay in the realm of physical geography forever. It asks us to look at why they chose the margins, and then it shifts into the esoteric meaning of living on the edge.
So it gets philosophical.
Very. In these mystical traditions, Gad represents the spiritual warrior.
So we aren't just talking about wielding physical iron swords and wooden shields anymore. The battlefield changes.
It changes entirely. The text moves into what esoteric traditions refer to as sacred combat.
Sacred combat.
Yeah, this isn't about fighting neighboring armies. It's about the internal war that every single one of us faces daily.
Right.
It is the constant, grueling battle against our own ego, against ignorance, inertia, and illusion. The literature positions Gad as the sentinel standing at the very threshold of the soul.
Guarding against any force that seeks to violate what is sacred within you.
Ex-
I'm struggling with the real-world application of this, though. Because if Gad is out there on the margins, geographically in ancient times, or spiritually in our own internal landscape, doesn't that mean they are completely disconnected from the heart of the community?
That's a fair question.
Like, in the real world, if you are the one operating on the absolute fringe of your company or your family or your social circle, you usually just get forgotten, right? How do you maintain loyalty when you are separated from the main hub?
What's fascinating here is that the text actually addresses that exact paradox.
Oh, it does.
Yeah. The lesson Gad offers the spiritual initiate is that you do not need to be at the center to serve the center.
I mean, that sounds poetic, but what is the actual mechanism there? How does the margin serve the center?
Well, think about the flow of information and protection. The center is where the culture is preserved, but the margin is where the culture interacts with the unknown.
Okay, that makes sense.
By standing on the frontier, the warrior filters what comes in. They absorb the initial shock of any crisis so the center can remain stable.
I see.
The esoteric traditions argue that sometimes the absolute most vital service happens on the edges. The path of Gad proves that the greatest guardians aren't the ones standing comfortably next to the throne.
Right. They're the ones enduring the elements on the perimeter, ensuring the integrity of the whole structure from the outside looking in.
Precisely.
But if maintaining that outer perimeter is so crucial to protecting the center, how did later traditions try to replicate Gad's strategy? Because the source material introduces a huge thematic shift here.
It really does jump forward in time.
Yeah, it shows how this frontier guard concept shows up in modern esoteric practices, specifically within Freemasonry.
Right, and the parallel drawn in the text is really striking. In Freemasonry, there is a specific officer known as the Tyler.
The Tyler.
Yeah, the Tyler is the outer guard of the lodge. Their solitary duty is to protect the sanctity of the meeting from without, to ensure that only those who are qualified and invited may enter the space.
So, much like the tribe of Gad sitting beyond the Jordan River, the Tyler actually misses the inner proceedings. They aren't in the room where the core rituals and teachings are taking place.
They are physically outside a closed door, yet the text emphasizes they are indispensable to the protection of the group.
Wow.
More importantly, they remain spiritually aligned with the inner sanctum despite being excluded from the room. The sources also point to the chivalric orders within Masonry, like the York and Scottish Rites.
Wait, before we move on, why specifically the York and Scottish Rites? What do those add to the concept of the Frontier Guard?
Well, those specific rites focus heavily on the philosophical archetype of the knight. In these degrees, the initiate takes up a symbolic sword.
Okay.
But crucially, the text notes it is never a sword of conquest or personal ambition. It is a sword taken up strictly for justice and divine duty.
That's a huge distinction.
Huge. The author Albert Pike, in his seminal work Morals and Dogma, is quoted in your sources describing this perfectly. He writes that the true initiate defends right against wrong with the sword of spirit.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now?
Yeah, let's ground it.
The text uses the symbol of the compass to explain this. A compass is literally a tool used to draw a circle, to mathematically delineate a boundary. Let's ditch the old cliche of a bouncer standing outside a club.
Right, no bouncers here.
Think of the warrior of Gad, or the Tyler, more like the biological cell wall in your own body.
Oh, that's a brilliant analogy.
Thanks. A cell wall is a semi-permeable membrane. It doesn't just blindly block everything. It possesses the intelligence to selectively allow nutrients in while keeping toxins out.
Yes, exactly.
It defines what is the cell and what is the outside world. That is what the compass represents, a psychological tool for defining your own personal boundaries.
That biological metaphor captures the mechanism perfectly. It is about knowing exactly where you end and the world begins, and having the fortitude to protect that line intelligently.
But the sources point out that this brings us to a pretty profound philosophical challenge.
It definitely does.
The danger of the sword. Because history is full of frontier guards who realized they held all the weapons and, well, turned into warlords.
Right.
If your immune system becomes too aggressive, it attacks the host.
That is the eternal risk of the warrior archetype. If Gad is armed with a sword and a compass, constantly maintaining borders, how do they keep from becoming an aggressive tyrant?
That's the million-dollar question.
The sources answer this by layering in Kabbalistic and alchemical insights to explain the internal checks and balances.
I'm going to break down the Kabbalah piece first, because there's some terminology here we need to clarify. The text says Gad corresponds to the Sapphira known as Keter.
Right.
What exactly is a Sapphira and what is Keter?
So in Kabbalistic philosophy, a sapphire in plural is sephiro, is essentially an emanation or a specific sphere of divine energy on the tree of life.
Okay, like a point of energy.
You can think of them as nodes through which the universe is structured. Keter translates to crown. It represents the supreme will, the divine origin.
The very top.
Exactly. It is the absolute highest node, the ineffable spark of intention before any physical form is ever manifested.
And what does being linked to the crown mean for our frontier warrior?
Well, the defining characteristic of Keter in these texts is that it directs without force. It sustains everything without opposition.
Directs without force. Can you give an example?
It's like gravity. Gravity doesn't angrily force you to the ground. It just fundamentally is, and everything aligns to it.
Oh, that's wild.
The text argues that Gad becomes a vessel of this Keteric energy. That means his actions are sovereign, purposeful, and completely aligned with a higher will, never personal ego.
So his strength does not arise from angrily opposing an enemy.
No, it comes from perfect alignment with the structure of the universe.
The alchemy section of the text tries to explain how you achieve that state, right? It mentions that Gad corresponds to the stage of illumination that follows purification.
Yes, the sources refer to the fires of calcination.
Calcination.
Yeah, in physical alchemy, calcination is the process of burning a substance down to its absolute, incorruptible base ash. Psychologically, it means burning away the volatile ego, the petty desires, the personal biases.
Ugh.
For Gad, the fire of battle undergoes this calcination. It is transformed from biological rage into the radiant, pure white light of Keter.
It also mentions a planetary alignment with Mars, which, usually represents iron aggression and war.
Right, but here, the esoteric texts claim that aggressive iron is transfigured. Because it has been purified and infused with that Keteric light, Mars becomes an instrument of higher justice. It is no longer a brutal weapon of biological destruction.
I'm still caught on the biological reality of this, though. When we think of warriors, we usually picture blinding rage, adrenaline, chaos, the berserker screaming on the battlefield.
There, it's an evolutionary survival mechanism.
Right. But Gad is associated with pure white light, profound, calm, and deliberate intention. How does one actually decouple the biological rage from the act of fighting? Like, how do you swing a sword or even just enforce a strict boundary at work without personal passion or anger?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the mechanism the texts suggest is detachment through total purpose.
Detachment.
Yeah. You aren't fighting because you are personally offended or angry. You are fighting because the boundary must be maintained for the health of the entire system. You remove the I from the equation.
So you become the boundary itself.
Exactly. You become the sword itself, acting on behalf of that divine intention rather than the angry hand swinging it out of spite or fear. When the ego is removed, the adrenaline is replaced by absolute cold clarity.
Man. The idea of a calm, egoless warrior sets us up perfectly for what is easily the most massive, unexpected twist in these sources.
Oh yeah, it is the ultimate paradox of the text.
We have this detached action, which leads to a wild astrological association. Here's where it gets really interesting. Gad, the lion-faced, spear-wielding, frontier-guarding warrior tribe, is associated with the zodiac sign Pisces.
I know, on the surface, that seems to contradict everything we've discussed about martial discipline.
It really does. If you read any standard astrological profile, Pisces, which is a mutable water sign ruled by Neptune, is stereotyped as highly emotional, dreamy, artistic, and just endlessly empathetic.
Right, it is the sign of the mystic.
It is not exactly the fierce, blood and iron warrior we've been picturing this whole time.
According to the astrological traditions cited in the text, it completely challenges our fundamental definition of what a warrior must be.
But if you combine the two, it makes Gad a mystic soldier. To picture how this works mechanically, think of a master martial artist practicing Aikido or Tai Chi at the highest possible level.
Great example.
They flow like water, they yield to pressure, they have this deep, almost psychic empathy for their opponent's energy and momentum. But they can strike with immense, devastating power the absolute second their boundary is breached.
Right.
It's combining deep oceanic empathy with fierce, unyielding protection.
And the texts lean heavily into that empathy. In astrology, Pisces governs intuition, but crucially, it governs the dissolving of boundaries.
Hold on, dissolving boundaries. We just spent the last 10 minutes establishing that Gad's entire job is to draw the boundary with the Masonic compass.
I know.
How can the warrior of boundaries be ruled by the sign of dissolved boundaries?
This is the genius of the esoteric pairing, and it resolves the paradox of the warlord we discussed earlier. To effectively guard the collective without turning into a tyrant, you have to deeply, fundamentally feel the collective.
Okay, I'm following.
Pisces dissolves the boundary between the self and the other within the community.
Ah, so you dissolve the internal boundary so you can fiercely guard the external one.
Precisely. Think back to the tribal symbol of Gad we discussed at the very beginning, a tent or a troop.
Right, the troop.
A troop is a collective bound by mutual purpose. They move as one entity. You can only move as one if you have dissolved the ego-driven boundaries that separate you from your brothers and sisters.
So the deep empathy of Pisces is exactly what fuels the warrior of Gad. It's the mechanism that keeps them pure. They aren't fighting to elevate themselves. They are fighting because they feel the vulnerability of the whole.
And the sources point back to those animals mentioned in First Chronicles to show how this balance is struck, the lion and the gazelle.
Oh, right, from the passage earlier.
Yeah, they represent the dual nature that must reside within the initiate. You have the inner strength, the groundedness, and the raw power of the lion, but that is paired harmoniously with the outer fluidity, the speed, and the grace of the gazelle.
So you need both.
The texts argue the true initiate must learn to embody both. You must know when to flow like water and yield, and when to stand firm like stone. Pisces, as a sign, often struggles with groundedness. It can, drift away into the mystical fog.
Sure.
The archetype of Gad provides the martial framework, the necessary grounding, to allow the Piscean empathy to manifest as true compassion and insight in the real world.
Bringing all these threads together. The ancient vanguard on the Jordan River, the Tyler guarding the esoteric lodge, the Kabbalistic white light of the crown, the martial artist flowing like Piscean water, it all builds toward a very practical, immediate takeaway for you, the listener.
It does.
The text synthesizes all of this into a concept called the inner gate.
The sources define it as the inner gate of Gad, the gate of courageous defense.
And just to be completely clear, the text isn't talking about a locked door in some hidden temple. This is a psychological and spiritual threshold inside of your own mind.
Right. This gate opens the moment you make the conscious, deliberate commitment to defend what is sacred, not only out in the world, but within yourself. It is the moment you take that compass and intelligently draw the line of your own semi-permeable membrane. The texts say it means actively saying no to violation, to falsehood, and to laziness.
And conversely, it means having the fortitude to say yes, to honor, to duty, and to constant vigilance.
But the text always loops back to that crucial caveat of restraint.
Right. Restraint is key.
Restraint is the ultimate sign of the initiate. The power to overcome must be wielded with wisdom and with love, never ego. The text recalls the blessing from Jacob. He shall overcome at the last.
At the last.
Yeah. That specific phrasing suggests that spiritual victory might be delayed. It might require immense patience. You might have to sit on the frontier for a long time.
Zoe.
But the esoteric promise is that victory is assured for those who maintain their discipline and fight the good fight without surrendering to the tyrant within.
So we want to pose some of the reflective questions pulled directly from the text to you. Think about your own journey.
Yeah.
What trials have shaped your inner resilience, and how did those hardships actually prepare you for greater work?
That's a huge one.
Yeah. How do you channel your own strength in ways that serve the whole rather than just dominating the people around you? What are you actually guarding in your life right now? And most importantly, when you do draw a hard boundary, are you being a warrior for your own ego, or are you genuinely fighting for truth?
This raises an important question, and the overarching theme here challenges us to redefine valor.
Yeah?
The source material teaches us that valor is never recklessness. It isn't picking a fight just to prove you are strong. Valor is a sacred responsibility. The true warrior does not actively seek out war, but they stand absolutely ready, with profound calm when justice calls for them.
Think back to that massive walled city we started with, those scouts out in the dark woods. They aren't out there starting forest fires. They're out there watching, waiting, deeply attuned to their environment, protecting the center by serving on the margins. So we will leave you with this one final thought to mull over as you go about your day. If the tribe of Gad teaches us that the most vital guardians are deliberately placed on the very edges of our territory, what vulnerable, exposed frontier in your own life is secretly your greatest source of spiritual strength?